Welcome everyone. I decided to create a video about spell combinations for Origins because this is a topic that I haven't really talked about, and yet I have plenty of videos about Dragon Age Inquisition combos, so I thought it would be a good idea to just get through each and every single one of them and rate them of how useful they are. Since the last videos uploaded about this topic are more than a decade old and they don't really go into much detail about the usefulness of these combos. Plus every now and then I get a question about this topic, so I figured why not just make a big video about it. So the first and worst combination is gonna be Grease Fire. You can create Grease Fire by casting Grease and then ignite it with a Fireball or Flames, but Flames actually need to hit a target for it to be able to ignite Grease. I consider this to be one of the worst combos because of the simple fact that it lacks damage. In fact, if you go to the combos page on the wiki, it's gonna incorrectly state that it deals 30 damage in every 1.5 seconds for 20 seconds, which if it would be true, then Grease Fire would not be useless. That would actually yield around 400 damage for that 20-second duration, which would be pretty good. It would be very useful to use it against the Broodmother or Caladrius, or even against the static archers who surround Gothrian. Sadly, that damage is nowhere near accurate. So when you check the Grease Fire page on the wiki, that's where you're gonna see the real number, which is basically 2 damage in every 1.5 seconds for 20 seconds. So it's not 30 damage every 1.5 seconds for 20 seconds, but 30 damage overall in that 20 seconds. That's terrible. Even at the beginning. I don't think a common Nug could die from that much damage. My fist as a mage deals more damage than that, which is sometimes what I do at the beginning. I just smack those wisps. Imagine if I would cast a Grease Fire on them. I don't even think the wisps could die from this. And they are the starter enemies. So in my opinion, if a good smack from my left hook is more powerful than a spell combo, then that spell combo sucks. And it should get comfortable with the F rating because it's not gonna get any higher than that. Not to mention, why on earth would you spend 3 spells to get Grease Fire instead of spending 3 spells to just get Fireball? I mean, Fireball is just way better. It has an initial impact damage, it has more OTD, and it even knocks enemies down. So what exactly is the point of Grease Fire? But if you think that Grease Fire is the most useless combo, well then let me introduce you to Flame Quencher. So Flame Quencher is basically a dream come true for people whose only dream is to put out Grease Fire, because that's all it does. The way you execute it is basically you summon a blizzard on top of an already burning Grease Fire, and then the blizzard will quench it. Now, this spell was obviously not created with Nightmare in mind. I honestly can't think of a single situation where I could use this. It actually makes me puzzled of what exactly am I supposed to do with this. I mean, yeah, I'm supposed to quench Grease Fire, but in what situation? So is the situation that enemies are trapped in Grease Fire and I'm just gonna use Blizzard to put it out so that I would save the enemies from the Grease Fire? I'm guessing not. So then it's for the team, right? I'm supposed to save the team from the Grease Fire. So the only problem with that is that Blizzard actually deals way more damage than Grease Fire. And it also applies way more negative effects. So with Grease Fire, you basically have a tiny little fire damage and then you just slip. But with Blizzard, you can slip, you can freeze, you're gonna be slowed, and you're gonna have 5, 6, or even more times the damage that you would have with Grease Fire. So if you're trying to save your team from Grease Fire by summoning a blizzard on top of it, what you're basically doing is you're yanking your team out of the frying pan and then just drop them into liquid nitrogen. Now, does that sound like a good idea to you? Okay, but wait. So what if the Grease Fire is in front of you? Let's say you triggered a trap and then the enemy just set it ablaze, and now it's just in your way and you don't want to walk into it because of the slip and the damage. Surely then Flame Quencher is good, right? Well, no. First of all, you can just wait. It has a 20-second duration, and when that time is gone, then the fire is gone. Now, if you're gonna summon a blizzard on top of the grease fire, then guess what you're gonna do? Wait more. Because not only you summon blizzard later, but it also has a longer duration than the grease fire. It's 30 seconds. And if you're unwilling to walk into a grease fire, then you should be unwilling to walk into a blizzard. So I know I said that Grease Fire is the worst combo, but it's actually hard to find a more useless one than this one. So I think Flame Quencher is also gonna get the well-deserved F rating, simply because of the fact that there is absolutely no use for it. Which brings us to Advanced Reanimation, which you can cast by using Reanimation while you're under the effect of Spellmite. And this is supposed to augment the normal Reanimation, which, to be fair, it does, but I still feel like it's a little bit lackluster. You only get one additional ability and a magical weapon, usually something that adds elemental damage. Sadly, it doesn't fix the most annoying part of this spell, which is once you leave the area, you're gonna lose your corpse. So it doesn't matter how powerful it is, you're still gonna lose it if you exit or enter a place or travel, which is especially annoying because you need an actual corpse to resummon it again. So this combo is definitely much worse than even the most basic ranger summons, especially since Reanimate has a longer cooldown. So although you can make it work, especially if you're going with 3 mages and then you can have this little undead army, which is what I did with my Blood Necro build, on its own, this spell combination is not all that impressive. So honestly, I don't think I could give a higher rating than D. But still, I'm not saying it's not somewhat useful. It's definitely more useful than the previous two. It's just Animate Dead is such an inconvenient spell. And speaking of somewhat useful spell combos, let's just talk about Shockwave. Now, I usually use Shockwave for one thing and one thing only, and at that thing, it's really good. So the combo is basically created when someone is trapped in a crushing prison, and then someone pulls a force field on top of that. It also works the other way around. But even though this spell has a massive area effect knockdown with some damage, the worst thing you can do with it is to use it offensively. I don't know about anybody else, but I use Crushing Prison on mages and elites, definitely the more dangerous elements of the group. And since it's a very good spell, it does a very good job of keeping these enemies out of the fight. In fact, if you stack your magic, it can actually deal a lot of damage on them. So I think it's definitely our best interest to keep the spell on the enemies as long as possible, instead of just detonating it for a knockdown effect with a little bit of damage, and then freeing one of the most dangerous enemies on the battlefield, who is now free to attack you because you aggroed him with Crushing Prison. So using this combo offensively just doesn't make sense to me, but what does make sense is to use it defensively. So the way to use it defensively is basically when an enemy casts Crushing Prison on you or your tank, then you or your party can just pull a force field on that. This way you can save yourself or your tank from one of the most dangerous spells in the game. This is actually very useful when you go through the deep roads because there are a lot of emissaries there and they just love using Crushing Prison, and they also like mixing it with Curse of Mortality, which is basically a guaranteed death sentence early on. So this spell combo, although it's very situational, definitely has its uses, and simply because it is indeed a lifesaver in those situations, I think it definitely deserves at least a C. So now we are actually moving up to the better combos, the combos that I actually like and use often. And one of those combos is Nightmare. Now, Nightmare is a fantastic combo. It not only deals a horrendous amount of damage, but it also takes the enemy out of the fight for a pretty long period of time. You can execute a Nightmare combo by casting Sleep on a target and then Horror once the target is asleep. This is gonna deal a lot of spirit damage, and it will also apply the fear effect from Horror, which is pretty good against mages and warriors who are using Indomitable. This is actually a perfect way to take them out of the fight, even if they are immune to knockdown or stun. The fear effect will easily go through those resistances. This combo is excellent against bosses because rank doesn't affect the 10-second duration. The damage part of the combo works on enemies who are immune to fear but not immune to sleep. You can also improve the damage by casting vulnerability or affliction hex on the target before you execute the combo. So to me, this is definitely an A tier spell combo because not only it's a lifesaver, but you can also use it offensively very effectively. And speaking of offensive spell combos, let me just introduce one of my favorite, which is Shatter. You can trigger a Shatter combo by freezing or petrifying an enemy, and then cast a Stone Fist or a Crushing Prison on them. But a critical hit from your rogues and your warriors can also trigger it. Now, unlike in Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, Shatter here is actually an instant death. Anyone who gets shattered is gonna explode into pieces. Now, this is an amazing combo to start taking down the weaker members of the group, because most of the time all you have to do is just cast Cone of Cold and then just let your rogues and warriors do the rest. Which is one of the main reasons why I love this combo so much. It's just so incredibly easy to execute it. In fact, sometimes I'm just trying to freeze the enemies and they already explode in my face because my team just triggered Shatter with their critical hits. And if you consider the fact that you only need one spell to have this combo because your team can just do the rest, then it should be pretty obvious why I love this combo so much. The only real problem I can think of when it comes to Shatter is the fact that it doesn't work on bosses or elite bosses. In fact, even on elites, you only have a 5% chance of being able to trigger Shatter, which, needless to say, it's not a lot. You might as well just forget shattering elites, although sometimes you can get lucky. But it's definitely not meant to deal with higher ranking enemies, it's just against the normals. But to be fair, 80% of the game are normal enemies, and since Shatter does an excellent job of getting rid of them, I don't think I'm being over generous when I give this spell combo a B. I think it's well deserved. It can get rid of 80% of enemies in the game instantly, and it will also give a satisfying death to some of the more annoying ones. So there really isn't much to say about this next combination other than it works and I love it. Similar to Nightmare, Improved Drain can also be used offensively and defensively. Executing the combo is also child's play. All you have to do is just cast Vulnerability Hex on the target and then Life Drain. This is basically gonna double the damage and the heal effect of Life Leech. You can also swap out Life Drain to Mana Drain and use the combo on mages, although Mana Drain only receives a 50% leech bonus, unlike Life Leech, which gets a 100%. I think I use this combo the most often, right next to Shatter. It just comes super handy when your healing spells are on cooldown, or you're doing a build that doesn't use healing spells. I also use this combo with Morrigan, because this is a quick way for her to heal at the beginning. Life Drain is a good spell, but it lacks damage and heal, and this combo fixes that perfectly. So other than the 20-second cooldown of Vulnerability Hex, there is really nothing negative about this combo. I just wish we could execute it with Affliction Hex as well, because that way we could use it every 10 seconds instead of every 20, because Life Drain only has a 10-second cooldown. But other than that, there is really nothing else. This is definitely how an A tier spell combo looks like to me. So this brings us to, in my opinion, the best spell combo in the game, which is Paralysis Explosion. So what this combo does is basically it takes out a huge group of enemies from the fight for an extended period of time, even on Nightmare. You can execute the combo by casting a Glyph of Paralysis and then a Glyph of Repulsion on top of it. It also works the other way around. In fact, I recommend that you start with Glyph of Repulsion because it's gonna make the spell combo irresistible. Just be careful when you cast it because it has a large area of effect and you certainly don't want to be affected by the explosion because it's gonna hold you for a very long time. The basic duration is 20 seconds and this is gonna be adjusted by target rank and difficulty. But even if you use it against bosses and elite bosses, the duration is still pretty good for Nightmare. In fact, it's definitely better than pretty much every other paralyzing spell in the game. Especially if we consider the inescapable nature of this combo, since it doesn't check for physical or mental resistance. The only way to resist it is spell resistance, and even that can be avoided simply by starting the combo with Glyph of Repulsion. But the reason why I love this combo so much is because it can turn very difficult fights into extremely easy ones, simply because neither Glyph of Paralysis nor Glyph of Repulsion needs a line of sight to cast. Therefore, we can just summon this combo into very dangerous areas without being exposed. And then once the combo explodes, we can just send in the team to quickly kill the enemies while everyone is being paralyzed. So I don't think I'm gonna surprise anyone by giving this combo an S tier, because it is an extremely useful one. However, just make sure when you cast it, you don't get trapped in it. So these last two combos, I don't really use them often. I acknowledge that they are powerful, because many people swear up and down that they are the best combos in the game. I disagree, because I think we should rate combos based on their overall usefulness, not just based on their pure damage. And these two combos are definitely situational at best, but granted, at those situations, they can come pretty handy. So the first one is Entropic Death, which is essentially the combination of a single target curse with an area effect spell. So the way to perform the combo is basically you cast a Death Hex on the target, then summon a Death Cloud, which is gonna remove Death Hex, and it's gonna turn it into a Colossal Spirit damage. You can improve the damage by casting Vulnerability and Affliction Hex before you execute the combo, and that way the damage can be truly massive. However, pulling this off on elite bosses can be pretty tricky, because they would need to fail every single spell resistance check, but when that does happen, it's pretty amazing. So at dealing damage, it's awesome, but I have a couple of problems with this combo. And the first one is Death Cloud itself. I really don't like spells where you have to summon the effect, and it's gonna leave you completely exposed for a while. Also, Death Cloud has a pretty good area effect, so it might be a bit difficult to keep your team away from it. Not to mention, after this combo drops, every enemy in the Death Cloud is just gonna start charging at you because of the amount of damage that you just dealt. Then there is of course the spell investment. You have to invest a total of 8 spells to get this combo, which might not be worth it unless you're specifically going after an entropy focused build, and it consumes a lot of mana. So you should definitely save it for someone who's worth it, meaning bosses and elite bosses. Unfortunately on Nightmare they have a pretty good chance of resisting your Death Hex, so you might just end up wasting all that mana for nothing. Plus there is of course the resistance factor. The spell hits pretty hard on enemies with weak spirit resistance, but on enemies with good spirit resistance it is pretty ineffective. So you better apply curses, which is gonna cost you even more mana. So I think the best tier that I can give this combo is a B. I mean, there is no doubt about it, it can deal a lot of damage, especially if you're lucky. But considering all the cost with the mana, the spells, the inconvenient nature of Death Cloud, and the fact that bosses can still resist the spell, I just don't think it's worth the price. So this brings us to the final combination in the game, the ultimate damage combo, Storm of the Century. You can perform the combo by sustaining Spellmight and then summoning a Blizzard on top of a Tempest, or the other way around, essentially creating a massive lightning storm. This lightning storm has a 30-second duration and it deals more damage than Blizzard and Tempest combined, which pretty much makes Storm of the Century the most powerful combo in the game in terms of raw damage. Most enemies in this game have very little or no lightning resistance, which is why it's pretty easy to see why this combo is considered great. So the combo damage on its own is pretty good, but if you start applying curses, it's gonna reach a whole new level. Amplifying the damage of the combo by using resistance weakening spells like Vulnerability and Affliction Hex is a pretty good way to turn otherwise difficult boss fights into a complete joke. In fact, I think combining the hexes with Storm of the Century is pretty much the fastest way to nuke bosses with the mage. Outside of Mana Clash with the mages, this has to be the most efficient way to take down enemies with a large amount of health. However, it doesn't just end here with Storm of the Century, you can also use this spell against large mobs, especially if you know where they are spawning from, which is pretty much gonna guarantee their deaths before they could ever get out of the AoE. Normal mobs usually don't have lightning resistance, so if you summon it tactically, entire hordes can be taken out of the fight instantly. So if you put this all together, it's pretty clear why this is the ultimate AoE damage spell in the game. Which of course means that this spell is also an S tier. No, it isn't. First off, my main problem with this spell is the horrendous AoE. It's 20 meters, and what are you trying to do, nuke Thedas? This is twice the size of Blizzard or Tempest, and there is no indication when you summon it. So unless you're an experienced user of Storm of the Century, most of the time, this spell is just gonna get your team killed. This is definitely one of those combos that's more dangerous to you than to the enemy. In fact, the AoE is just so bloated that it makes this spell completely useless inside. Even if you're at a great hall with plenty of space, you still have to look for little pockets and safe places where you can hide from your own spell. Also, without curses, this spell is not all that effective on some of the bosses where you would want it to be effective. For example, a perfect place to summon it is against the Archdemon. The AoE is definitely not a problem there. However, the Archdemon comes with a huge amount of lightning resistance, which means that without curses, you're just gonna end up wasting all that mana. Speaking of which, this spell is the most mana heavy spell in the game. In addition to the cost of Tempest and Blizzard, this combo also drains 100 mana from your mana pool. That is of course if you have 100 mana. Otherwise, it's just gonna drain all of it. If you want to execute the combo on your own, you're also gonna need at least 10 skill points invested into specific places, otherwise you're not gonna be able to perform it. But even if you have help from another mage, you would still need at least 7 points invested in order to summon it together. This combo also has the longest casting duration in the game, the bare minimum being 10 seconds. So depending on how fast you're targeting the area where you want to summon it, it can take up to 15 or even more seconds to cast it. Since the mage can easily be knocked down or stunned, that is an awful lot of time to be exposed to area effect attacks or disabling skills, which pretty much mandates for you to have a proper tank with you all the time. So as I mentioned before, Storm of the Century is pretty damaging, which is awesome, but it does have its downside. The second you cast this spell on the battlefield, you might as well just cue the Yakety Sax because every enemy is gonna start chasing you. And if you decide to run away or retreat, you're just gonna pull them out of the spell's radius, which is gonna make the entire combo pointless. But with all that said, I think I still gonna give this combo a B because it can be a lot of fun if you're pulling it off effectively. So if you wanna use it, I think I will share a few tips on how to use this combo properly. The first one can work with or without the team, and it involves another combo, which is our beloved Paralysis Explosion. So essentially, you paralyze everyone by detonating Paralysis Explosion, and then you summon a Storm of the Century on top of them. Even though you can do this alone, I recommend you do this with another mage, because that way you can already start summoning Storm of the Century before you detonate Paralysis Explosion. This can make sure that the casting time of Storm of the Century will not take away that much time from the duration of the paralysis. The second way requires a tank. You're gonna send the tank into the middle of the crowd, hit Taunt, pull a force field on him, and then summon Storm of the Century. I recommend that you have at least 2 force fields, because Storm of the Century lasts longer than force field, so it's pretty much inevitable that your tank is gonna be hit by it. Alternatively, you can also just dispel Storm of the Century. The third one is actually my favorite. You can do this with or without the team. So once you cast Storm of the Century, all you have to do is just cast an anti-magic ward on yourself, run into the middle of the crowd, and once the anti-magic ward expires, pull a force field on yourself. This can pretty much guarantee that every enemy in the area is gonna be dead. If you wanna keep your team safe, just make sure you pause them before you enter Storm of the Century. The enemies, they're not gonna chase anybody but you. So I think I pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover in this video. Obviously my rating is not universal, I'm sure some of you disagree, but this is just my opinion. I hope you found this video helpful, or at least you know more about combos than you did before. I hope you're having a good day, and I hope you're just gonna start blasting combos now. Good luck.